Does anybody really understand what nanotechnology is? No. See, that's it. We don't know what it is. So it must be important. Okay, we don't know what it is. So it must be something that we want. Nanotechnology can actually do a lot for us. Nanotechnology, is, as the name implies, is using very small parts, if you will, either electronic beams or actually small mechanical devices that can get places where our large mechanical devices cannot. It has lots of application in the medical fields, lots of application in engineering, in the building trades. Nanotechnology seems to be the latest and greatest thing. But as John pointed out here, is that we might not want to be a nanotechnology park because it would take too long. The inertia of our own infrastructure is so immense that there would be very little to gain by trying to shift. It's kind of like steering the Titanic, if you will, to avoid the iceberg. Why not just build the front of the Titanic stronger and hit it? I don't know if that's a good analogy. But we're going to have to use the advantages that we already have. And we have tremendous advantages here. But we can also spring from those as well. Yes, I would think that we would want to exploit, if you will, or expand our manufacturing base. I've heard too often in too many planning sessions where LaPorte County in particular was almost spoken down to by various planners because we don't look like a service economy. We're too heavily laden in manufacturing. And I would agree with John. I think that maybe one of the things we need to do is actually expand on that because that's where our advantages can be. We'll talk more about that later. So the mix is obviously varied across various regions. The performance within the clusters is obviously influenced by these various clusters, by the, it's an overly used word, the synergies between and among different clusters, as well as innovation. Innovation. You'll see that we have a running theme here. We like to think of new ways of doing things, new products, new manufacturing techniques, new service techniques for that matter, in order to make ourselves much more productive and thus more attractive for firms not only to locate here, but also for their customers to purchase products made here. And so the innovation is extremely important in understanding the performance of the various clusters. Another topic here that I want to talk a little bit about would be what we call regional wage differentials as it relates to relative performance of clusters. Regional wage differentials. Our wages here in Northwest Indiana tend to be certainly lower than Silicon Valley. Right? And so does that make us less competitive or more competitive with the Silicon Valleys of the world? You can't just look at wage differentials by themselves. We have lower wages here, but also our cost of living is a little bit lower here. Housing prices are significantly lower here than they are in Silicon Valley of New York, or in the Finger Lake area of upstate New York, or in even in many parts of the southeastern part of the United States and the southwestern part of the United States. So the cost of living weighed against the wage differentials would not necessarily be a hindrance, if you will, to our competitiveness, and certainly not the way that we would view the cluster's performance. And in fact, Porter tells us that there's very little correlation between wage differentials and the performance of clusters, regardless. And so if you read Porter's paper very carefully, and he goes through the laundry list of what's commonly held is, this determines the performance of our cluster, this determines the economic development possibilities of our region. And you look at wages, okay, that's not it. You look at geography, really that's not it either. You look at employment growth, well, maybe, but that's not really it either. And so you start to look, okay, so what is it? And what does he focus on? He focuses on innovation. He focuses on the patenting incidence. You know, how many patents are there per capita? How many patents are there not only per capita, but within a geographical region? But even then, there's a weak correlation, a relatively weak correlation between the number of patents and the overall economic growth of a region. So there's something missing. there seems to be something missing in the literature, and we hope to address that pretty soon here. Okay, so let's see, that's it? I'm not doing anything here. Complete lock. Well, while I'm waiting for the computer to unlock here, I think what we'll do is I'll ask you if anybody wants something to drink. I don't know what's going on here, so let me see if I can figure this out. Let's do this. Yeah, let's cancel that. There we are. You have to sometimes fool it. Here we go. Or my conclusion. Here we are. Conclusion. So time for a drink. Sorry. I figured out how to get out of the my stuck elevator, so to speak. All right. The conclusions from the Porter paper generally was that he concluded that policy really should focus on traded clusters, and we agreed with that. I think over the last couple of classes, we were talking about trying to get industries either growing within so-called clusters, kind of home growing these things, although in addition to bringing some more in, that will sell their products and possibly services outside of the region, so we can take advantages of the various injections. Wage differentials driven by wages in traded industries. We do see that the traded industries tend to pay a little better, which makes sense because we are selling our goods and services outside of that particular region. One other thing that we should focus our attention on, of course, would be upgrading the productivity of all of our clusters that we have. How can we encourage that? How can we encourage more productivity, let's say, in the compressor cluster that we have identified? How would you, let's brainstorm just for a second here. How would you think that we could encourage an increase in productivity of, let's say, the compressor cluster that we have seen? Or if you don't know about compressors, what about the packaging clusters that we see? How do we encourage that?
Training.
Training, okay. And what do you mean by training, Kevin?
Facilities to be, for these companies, to upgrade their workforce and productivity, there has to be places for the students to learn, or people that are coming up that want to get into that industry right now.
Okay.
It's pretty sketchy in our area of where they're going to get that type of training, unless it's on the job, or if there's specific courses at Ivy Tech or at Purdue North Central. But right now, there really isn't a regional, or I guess county-wide or county area for technical education.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that right now, those workers who are working in those industries and in the various clusters, they're gaining most of their training on the job at this point. Is that what you're saying? Or are they going to, let's say, a two-year school?
Probably a mix.
A mix of that.
Yeah.
Okay. What about in the high schools? What kind of training is there in the high schools that may help feed these different industries and improve their productivity? Maybe that's something to consider, right? Wouldn't it have been nice to have had that tech center, approved in Michigan City?
It has to occur there at the Ivy Tech level. Somebody's got to come up with facilities providing basic skills.
Right.
Through the broad spectrum of
Right.
industries that we have.
Right. Interesting thing about the facilities. I hear a lot of words about facilities. Oh, we don't have the facilities. We don't have. You know how many abandoned buildings we have around the area that can easily be renovated so you have facilities. So it's not just the buildings. It's not just the lack of facilities.